Music driven noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor pulls the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity when they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangle rise. Steam fun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello and welcome to the Punch Show. Thanks for joining. Hope you're having a fantastic day. And so today I want to talk about a few things. Most of this show I'm going to be talking about the insurrection that Donald Trump tried to carry out. And I'm going to go into a lot of detail on that. And, you know, its relevance is this new lawsuit against BBC. And I'm just sick of hearing these like really sad and valid talking points about how it wasn't really an insurrection. So I'm going to go into all of that and really nail down exactly how it was an insurrection and the whole plan and everything. So if you've ever just wondered about it and just felt like it was too deep to get into the weeds, then watch the whole show. All right. But first, I want to talk about a couple of other things. The first thing is that, you know, as we are now looking into how the ACA supplements are going to be replaced, the Republicans are offering as an alternative medical savings accounts. Which I'll say this: if you have money to fund a medical savings account and you have you're relatively healthy, a medical savings account can be a reasonable alternative to insurance. When you couple it with like high risk insurance with a high deductible. But if you're not a rich person or you're not a healthy person, then this is not an alternative. So what it does for rich people and healthy people is it minimizes the risk or the amount that they're going to have to pay for it. And it gives them a tax-free savings account. If you're poor, you don't have money to save. And even if they send you this little tiny voucher of whatever, that's not going to cover your medical cost if you're sick. So once again, like everything else to do with the Republicans and the Trump administration, the goal appears to be making things better for rich people at the cost of poor people. Making, you know, all of that is just like the universal what's the word I'm looking for? Correlation between all Republican policy is make the rich richer and make the poor poorer. So just so you know, like if you want, I might dive into that some more tomorrow, but I spent the last 2 days talking about the ACA, so I wanted to talk about something else today. The next thing I want to talk about is the Epstein emails. Is it Epstein or Epstein? I always hear it pronounced different ways. Anyway, there's these, you know, emails that have been leaked by the Democrats, and in one of them, allegedly, well, not allegedly, Epstein said that Trump knew about the girls, like, and you can talk about how the Democrats are just being opportunistic, that they're just throwing red meat to the wolves and all of that. But there's still red meat there, right? Epstein said Trump knew about the girls. Whatever else you want to add on to that doesn't change that. And you can talk about made up FBI investigations where he was the informant, but he never acknowledged that. He never said that. And there's all kinds of evidence, like he was in another email apparently hanging out at Epstein's house with one of the girls in 2011, years after it happened. So the idea that Trump was just unaware of what was going on with Epstein and then kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago because he heard he was creepy. Even that, like, I was just thinking about like the one quote where he says that Trump stole one of the girls from him. And it's just like, imagine how creepy you have to be to like talk about this woman or this girl that was raped and somehow make yourself out to be the victim of this crime. Like somehow he was the one that was really wronged here because Epstein stole one of his, like teenage masseuse workers or whatever it is. So anyway, wanted to touch on that, just weigh in. So the Republicans can sit there and talk about how the Democrats are just politicizing it as though they didn't politicize it running up to the election. And so I think that they're really kind of, people in glass. This is literally a people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones situation. They threw stones, they broke the glass, and now they're trying to run from it. And the Democrats, you can argue the Democrats were being opportunistic. I'm not going to deny that. But they're being opportunistic about something they saw in the files. And the Republicans were all, just going after it until they saw the files. And then they're just like, oh, trust me, bro, it's damning to Clinton. Yeah, right. That's why you don't want to release them. That's why you won't even seat the representative from Arizona to force the emails to be released. Like, release everything or shut up. Like, you made your bed. Now you need to lie in it. I don't care if you can say the Democrats have a double standard. I don't care if the Democrats do have a double standard. I care that the victims are going just like with not getting the justice that they deserve. So yeah, you can just stop with your little crying about how double standard the Democrats have. You have the same double standard, and the fact that you both changed your song when you saw the files tells me an awful lot about what Donald Trump knew and when he knew it. And and you can say, well, she said that he didn't have any knowledge of or any part in it. And it's like, I don't, even if he didn't like actually rape girls, which we don't know, and which I'm not conceding, but he knew about it. Epstein said he knew about it. And if he knew about it, why didn't he do anything about it? Why did he try to cover it up later in 2015? So, you can talk all you want about the Democrats' double standard. That does not change that you have one if you're complaining about it. And that does not change that Trump knew about the girls. And that does not change that the so-called oversight committee is covering up for him. All those things can be true at the same time. The Republicans can have a double standard and the Democrats can have a double standard at the same time. And in fact, if you're saying the Democrats have a double standard to justify the Republicans' double standard, then you have a triple standard where only Republicans are allowed to have a double standard. So yeah, chew on that for a while. Okay, now I'm going to go into the main thing I want to talk about today, which is this BBC lawsuit, where they're saying that they edited a speech in this program that showed only in England that made it look like he told everybody to go down and attack the Capitol. And they left out that he said peacefully. All right. So let's just frame this whole conversation accurately, because there has been so much lies, so much like, and it's even the mainstream media has backed away from some of the wording, like insurrection, and they were referring to it as a riot. They've tried to make it sound like Trump is not actually didn't actually actively try to overthrow the government. So let's talk about the entire thing. I'm going to go through the timeline. I'm going to go through the court cases, what it means that, they didn't rule based on merit, or why they ruled based on standing. And I'm going to go through the meetings between Donald Trump's people and associates and members of the people that organized the riot, and going to go into all the details, going to go through the damage, going to go through the weapons charges that people were convicted of. Was not that they didn't have guns. It's not that they didn't have weapons. It's not that it was nonviolent. They weren't just let in by the Capitol Police, going through all that stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is just share with you this, whoops. Okay. We're going to start with the timeline of events and the people who are involved. If I don't see your comments, then that's because I'm on a different tab reading through this. And anyway, there's some comment here about Magic Mike or whatever that it seems to have no relevance at all. So I'm just ignoring that. All right. So timeline to January 6, 2021. This is, the whole thing. So first of all, who were the key players? Donald Trump was president of the United States. He promoted false claims of election fraud and called supporters to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, right? Like, that's not disputable. Roger Stone was a Trump ally and operative key link between Trump campaign and extremist groups. Member of encrypted Friends of Stone chat. Michael Flynn, a former national security advisor who, was like convicted of crimes before this, advocated for with Russiagate, which was also a real thing. He's a former national security advisor, handpicked by Putin, by the way. He had advocated for martial law and seizing voting machines. He was also in contact with the Oath Keepers. The Proud Boys, headed up by Enrique Tarrio. He was a far right. That was a far right extremist group. He was convicted of seditious conspiracy. He coordinated with Stone and led the Capitol breach, even though he wasn't technically there. He planned the battle, so to speak. And then Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, headed up by a guy named Stuart Rhodes. He was the anti-government militia founder of. He was the founder of Oath Keepers, and he was convicted of seditious conspiracy too. So they say, oh, nobody was convicted of sedition. No, 2 people were convicted of sedition. So let's stop pretending like calling this an insurrection has no legal basis. It absolutely does. There was a sedition to try to overthrow the U.S. government. People were convicted of it, and Donald Trump played a part in it. Donald Trump didn't just play a part in it. In fact, Donald Trump was the leader of it. All right, so now let's go start with Election Day. Joe Biden defeats Donald Trump in the presidential election. Trump immediately declares victory while votes are still being counted and demands counting be halted. Well, he demanded counting be halted in some states and that it be finished in other states. And let me just say, counting was going to go to the end no matter what. And they kept characterizing the ongoing counting in states like Arizona, or no, I'm saying on the states like Michigan and Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, as votes still coming in. Like, oh, these votes keep coming in, as though they just came in. These votes were cast before election day or on election day. Most of those votes were cast long before election day. So they didn't just keep coming in, they just started getting counted. And there was some people saying, hey, look, we can count these early and avoid this fiasco. But Trump knew he was going to lose, and so he wanted this fiasco. So he put pressure on states to not count the votes ahead of time. Everyone knew this was going to happen. Everyone knew that there was going to be this backlog of mail-in ballots that were going to take forever to count. This was part of his plan from the outset. He wanted to complain that the election was stolen. That's why he was saying the election was stolen and spreading misinformation about the stolen election before the election was even finished. And that's all part of the whole grand scheme, which we'll get into. So then, on November 7th, Biden was declared the winner. All the major networks, and I think Fox was the first one, major networks declared Joe Biden president-elect. Trump and allies began pushing false claims of widespread voter fraud. Roger Stone starts organizing Stop the Steal movement. So they started this whole thing that the election was stolen, and it was not stolen. I just cannot emphasize enough. The election was not stolen. 81 million people really did vote for Joe Biden. You can deny that all you want. You can chortle, you can chuckle, you can, make your little snide comments, but it actually happened. 81 million Americans actually voted for Donald Trump, or for Joe Biden, and 74 million voted for Donald Trump. Joe Biden won the election. Period. End of story. And I'll say the same thing in 2024. Donald Trump won the election. I don't think that election theft is even plausible. Like, there's just too many scenarios for it to happen. So I'm not like sitting there, like saying on the one hand, oh, the election with Joe Biden wasn't stolen, but the election with Donald Trump was. No, neither election was stolen. So on November 7th, Biden declared the winner. November 9th, the Oath Keepers already started planning violence. Remember, stand back and stand by? Well, now it was time to step up. Oath Keepers leaders hold my members-only online conference. Leader Stuart Rhodes outlines a plan to stop the transfer of power, including preparations for using force. Plan includes storing an arsenal with a quick reaction force in nearby Virginia. And while I don't think all of this came to fruition, there's a reason for that, and that's because they ended up getting put in with the other plan, which we'll get into later when they start coordinating with Roger Stone and Enrique Tarrio and the Proud Boys. But this is just the plan for violent insurrection started on November 9th, 2 days after Biden was declared the winner. So then they decide, okay, they're going to do this Stop the Steal rally and Proud Boys March on December 12th. This isn't the one that happened on January 6th. Different one. 200 Proud Boys march near Freedom Plaza dressed in combat fatigues and ballistic vests. Violence erupts with forced stabbings and at least 23 arrests. Video shows Roger Stone speaking with Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio and Ethan Nordine the night before. So you've got your players, right? You've got the Oath Keepers, you've got the Proud Boys, and you've got Roger Stone. They're starting to connect to each other. Then at the same time as this is happening, from December 6th to the 14th, you've got, oh, wait, actually, before I go into that, at this point, all the court cases had been settled, and I wanted to go into the whole court case thing because that matters too. So I'm going to switch over to here, and now let's go through the court cases thing. And I've heard so many stupid arguments about the court cases, and they all come down. The first thing they always want to argue is, oh, well, they just ruled on standing, and suggesting that one, ruling on standing doesn't mean anything, and two, that if they had ruled on merits, that Trump would have won. Neither of those statements is true. All right, so why is standing important? What is standing? What does it mean? Okay, first, plaintiffs must show a specific individualized harm, not just a general grievance shared by all voters. So you can say, oh, like, how did the change in election laws because of accommodating the pandemic, how did that affect Republicans more than Democrats? Why was it unfair to this voter and not that voter? Right? You can't just say, oh, well, you let more Democrats vote. No, they let more people vote. The same exact procedures were available to Republicans as Democrats. So there's no bias involved there. There's no damage involved there. And then secondly, the defendant must have directly caused the claimed injury through their specific actions. So there is no injury, right? Like, you can't say, well, we would have won if that didn't happen. That's just fabrication. That's not an actual injury. And so there was no damage, so the defendant couldn't have caused the damage because the damage didn't happen. And then third, the court must be able to provide a remedy that would fix the plaintiff's specific injury. So there's no way to go back and fix that. You can't just declare the Republicans are the winner. You can't just declare these electorates are the real electorates. There's no do-over. You don't just get to get do-overs because you lost an election. So none of that, that's why standing matters. Because all that means something. Individuals, voters couldn't show they were harmed differently from all the other voters. And then, like, Texas sued Pennsylvania, but they couldn't show how Texas was affected, other than Pennsylvania determined their election differently than Texas did. That's not a damage to Texas. They're trying to take away Pennsylvania's voting rights because of the way that they conducted their election. That's not fair to the Pennsylvania voters. How is that going to be redressed? And then claims were often about potential fraud, not specific harms. So they would say, oh, well, this could have happened. This, might have happened, but nothing that actually did happen. There was not a single claim that actually was substantive, that they could actually prove voters were hurt by doing this. And the remedies sought, overturning entire state results, didn't match specific claimed injuries. So if the voting, if expanding mail-in voting applied to everybody, it's not fair to everybody to just say, oh, we're just going to overturn the election. We're just going to reverse the results. That's the people that voted in good faith. So their vote shouldn't be annulled because you lost the election. Why standing matters. It ensures courts decide actual disputes between proper parties, not abstract political questions. Without standing, courts have no jurisdiction to decide a case. So it's like it would be illegal for the court to do what the Republicans were asking them to do. Now, did the judges actually rule on the merits? The narrative is the courts refused to hear the cases, only dismissed on technicalities, never examined the evidence, and avoided the real issues. And in truth, in normal situations, the courts do not rule on the merits if they turn it down on technicalities, meaning standing. And that's because they don't want to bias future filings. Like, it's not normal to rule on the merits when you refuse a case based on standing. And that's like across the board. It's not like the courts decided, oh, we're not going to rule on the merits here. We're just going to dismiss it based on standing so we don't have to. The reality is many courts did rule on the merits. Evidence was thoroughly examined, multiple substantive rulings issued, and both standing and merits were addressed. And if you go through and you read the actual briefs, you can see that these were addressed. Merits were addressed over and over again. And in Wisconsin, the Supreme Court decided it 4-3. They examined ballot validity claims substantively and ruled on the merits of election procedures. The Pennsylvania courts ruled on signature verification and ballot curing procedures directly on the merits. And what they determined is that the state said, okay, every county can do it, every precinct can do it, or I'm sorry, every county can do it however they want. Conservative counties did not allow for a ballot curing process. Liberal counties did. But the same freedom to do it or not do it was fair to was there to everybody. And so the county making a decision, the state can't be blamed for that. And the county not doing it could have been political, right? Like, they knew that the Democrats were getting more mail-in votes, and so they're not allowing the curing because they don't want legal votes to actually count. So how do you redress that? How do you fix that? By throwing out people who voted legally? By throwing out their votes? How is that an appropriate remedy? The Arizona judges examined all the Dominion machine claims thoroughly and found no evidence of manipulation. And since then, there have been, like, I don't know how many audits and recounts and whatnot, but this is the most thoroughly reviewed state of them all, and there was never any fraud found by anyone. The Michigan courts reviewed fraud affidavits and found them insufficient, addressing evidence quality directly. There was like some weird things, like somebody said something about how a catering van with Biden on the door, it said Biden Harris on the door, and they came out and they dropped off all these ballots, and there was this affidavit about it. That's not proof. That's just an unfounded allegation. Nobody else saw it. Like, this one person was the only person that saw this, and there's no evidence that this ever happened, and it just happened. And, like, just stop, you know. Georgia courts, multiple cases examining specific fraud allegations substantively across counties. Not one of these, not like these were all states where they did rule on the merits, and they did so even though they didn't have to. And even though in some cases maybe they shouldn't have. So why did they rule on merits when they didn't have to? Courts went beyond standard practice. Many judges addressed both standing and merits. Unusual because courts typically stop at standing if jurisdiction is lacking. This demonstrates how seriously courts took these cases during an extraordinary political moment. On normal practice, they dismiss on standing only. They don't issue advisory opinions. They preserve judicial resources, and they avoid unnecessary rulings. Here they address standing and merits. They provided comprehensive opinions, and I've read the opinions. It is amazing to me that there are so many people that will say, oh, they didn't rule on the merits. And then they'll say that they read the opinion. And I'm like, how did you read the opinion and not know that they ruled on the merits, since ruling on the merits was actually in the opinion? They discussed evidence problems, and they discouraged refiling attempts. And I would like to point out that lawyers who brought these cases lost their law license. These are not like close calls. People got disbarred over this crap. Although it did give us the moment where Rudy Giuliani farted and Sidney Powell had to smell his fart. So that was kind of cute. Anyway, why did judges do this? Because of the extraordinary political moment and massive public interest, desire to provide rulings that couldn't be second guessed, effort to foreclose further litigation on same issues, and recognition that standing only rulings might fuel conspiracy theories. So they did everything that the Republicans wanted, and then the Republicans denied that they did the things that they wanted. That's how dishonest the Republicans were in all of this legal mumbo jumbo. So, would any case have won on the merits? No. Credible legal experts argue that those cases would have succeeded, that these cases would not have succeeded on the merit. Why? Evidence problems were severe. Affidavits were often contained hearsay, speculation, or misunderstandings of normal procedures. See the two black women in Georgia. They made statistical claims, repeatedly dunked by experts and election officials. You see all these things about, well, this is statistically impossible to win this Bellwether County and not that Bellwether County. And like all kinds of, these are nonsense. They're absolute nonsense. And the people that are making these claims have no validity in making them. The Dominion machines were investigated by cybersecurity experts who found no manipulation. Fox News has admitted that they lied about those things. They have been settling. They settled what was it? I forget, like $750 billion or $1 million settlement or whatever it was. I forget how much money. And then there are the recounts and audits, like a lot of these things about how things were stolen or whatever. It would have been found in the recounts. They would have been found in the audits. But no matter how many times you count the same ballots, they come up with the same number. And so even Trump's own campaign team, our own legal team, acknowledged it. Bill Barr, who was the attorney general, said the DOJ found no fraud that would change the outcome. Chris Krebs, who was in charge of the cybersecurity, called it the most secure election in American history. Trump campaign lawyers, under oath and facing sanctions, walked back fraud claims that they made publicly, and Trump-appointed judges rejected these cases consistently. All right. So there was no substance. There was zero substance to any of these arguments. There was not one substantive argument that they made. All right. Now they'll talk about, oh, well, you changed the rules. You changed the rules right before the election, as though this was like an arbitrary thing. There was a pandemic going on that was killing over 1 million people, and people didn't want to like choose between voting and dying. So some states decided, you know what, we're not going to make people risk their lives. We're going to let them mail in their ballots. And so they changed their voting procedures. They extended deadlines for receiving mail ballots to account for postal delays. Remember how Trump tried to rig the whole mail system by firing the chief postal guy and slowing down the mail so it would take longer to get there? Yeah, so do I. They relaxed the signature thing. This was like, when you send in mail and ballot, they check your signature against the one on hand. But not everybody always signs their name in the same way. And sometimes when you first get your license, you sign your name differently than you do like later. Like I've got a little bit of arthritis, and I got my driver's license here in Texas 15 years ago. So when I signed my name, now it's slightly different because my fingers aren't able to hold the pen the same way. So what they did is they said, okay, if your signature doesn't match, you can cure your ballot. You can come and you can show your ID and affirm that, yes, you voted this ballot was yours. They didn't just count them. They didn't just say, oh, we're just not going to match signatures. They gave people an opportunity to show that they actually voted. They had more drop boxes so that you could, drop off those boxes. And you've got that stupid movie by the stupid guy. Can't think of his name. Dinesh. The 20,000 mules or 2,000 mules or however many mules it was. And he used an upside down map of Moscow to prove that there was like illegal voting in Georgia. Or he would you were allowed to drop off ballots for family members. And so he would show black people, like dropping off multiple ballots, which was legal, as proof that there was fraud. So then, there was the ballot curing, which goes back to the signatures, and include some other things, like if you just forgot to sign it, or if you didn't write your name on the envelope the way it was supposed to, or whatever. It allowed people to cure ballots. It did not allow people to vote after election day. And it didn't allow just Democrat voters to do that. It allowed anybody to do that. If you voted for Trump and your signature didn't match, you could come and show your ID and your vote would count. It did not apply disproportionately to Democrats. The only reason that Democrats may have benefited more from it is because they weren't stupid enough to go and vote in person just to prove that COVID was a hoax. And the important context here is many of these accommodations were made by Republican officials trying to balance elections with public health. Republicans were behind some of these changes. Both red and blue states made similar changes nationwide. They did not sue the blue states or the red states for the changes they made. They only charged the swing states. Changes had often had bipartisan support or were made under existing legal authority. A lot of these things were done under emergency authority that was already granted to governors and things like that. That's why none of these things had any wins in the court. Courts found these charges either properly authorized or that challenging them after the election would disenfranchise millions who voted in good faith. And that's this is this retroactive, oh, the vote shouldn't count because of this is in bad faith. That goes back to the remedy. What is the remedy? Those people actually went and intended to vote and voted. So to just say, oh, we're going to change the rules. It's like if you were to say after the football game that 2-point conversions only count for 1 point, and the team that had two 2-point conversions and won by a point, now all of a sudden they lost. You can't change the rules after the game. States have had broad constitutional. So this is the next thing. States determine what their what their election laws are. The federal government cannot tell the state how to run its elections. This is universal. That's why Texas makes it so hard to vote. Texas has the stingiest voter laws, and a state like California has very I don't want to say they have very free voting laws. They make it a lot easier to vote. You can do universal mail-in ballots. In Washington, you can do universal mail-in ballots. You don't need an excuse to mail in your ballot, and there shouldn't have to be one. But California can have its laws, and Texas can have its laws. Texas can't tell California what to do, and California can't do what Texas can do, and DC can't tell either one what to do. But they were making this argument that only state legislatures can set election rules. This was based on one little sentence from the Constitution that has never been interpreted that way before. Governors regularly sign and veto election laws, right? Like the legislature can't just pass a law and the governor is ignored. The governor can still ignore it, can still veto it or sign it. So doesn't that imply that the governor has some say in it and not just the state legislatures? State courts interpret election statutes, so the state courts have a say in things. Election officials exercise discretion, and state constitutions constrain legislatures. So there's all kinds of limitations on what the legislature can do, and there's all kinds of other people that have a say in it. So this is why the whole notion that, oh, only the state legislature can change the voting laws is just hokey. In Moore versus Harper in 2023, the Supreme Court rejected the extreme independent state legislature theory. So now the Supreme Court has ruled on this, and this was a Trump Supreme Court. This is the same court that overturned Roe versus Wade. So bottom line, most of the 2020 charges were made under existing statutory authority already granted by the legislatures. Many states had laws explicitly giving officials emergency powers. Charges were consistent with state corporate interpretations of existing law, and the argument that only legislatures could act even during a pandemic emergency was inconsistent with how American elections have always functioned. So summary, standing matters. Many judges did rule on the merit. There's no credible evidence of any thing that would overturn even one election, much less the whole election, even one county, much less the whole election. The strongest cases were about a procedural authority to make a pandemic accommodations that were overturned or that were ruled on by the Supreme Court in 2023. And states control their own elections through normal governmental procedures, not legislature alone. So if you want to get into the legality of the election, or the whether or not the Republicans had their day in court, they absolutely did. But now let's go back to the timeline. And we're going to pick up with the fake electorate scheme, because I think the fake electorate scheme is I don't know what. There's some of these comments you people make are just weird. Toe Tickler Timmy might be in your closet. Please, what a weird thing to say. I think that there's like this whole culture of MAGA that has like all these inside references and stuff that's all based on weirdos. Anyway, I think that might be some kind of reference to Tim Walz. I don't know. So we'll go back to, they knew they were going to lose the election now, right? They knew they were going to lose it. They knew they had already lost it. And so they decided they're going to come up with this alternate electors scheme, where they're going to get people claiming to be the real electors from the states. And then the whole plan was you get these fake electors, and then the fake electors show up to cast their votes. Then you have representatives and senators like try to challenge the actual results and then substitute in the fake electors for the real electors. That's the fake elector scheme. And there were fake electors, and they used the term fake electors. So the Trump allies coordinates a scheme to submit fraudulent electorate college certificates from 7 battleground states where Biden won, falsely claiming Trump had won. The goal: give Vice President Mike Pence pretext to either reject legitimate electors or delay certification on January 6th. So the idea would be, okay, well, we don't know what to do. We don't know who really won these states. And so then in the 16th Amendment, it outlines, is it the 16th or the 14th? Anyway, it outlines what to do when the election is in dispute. And this was specifically addressing what happened after the Civil War ended, where there was literally the governor would sign off on one state of electors and the legislature signed off on another state of electors. There was legitimate in-state confusion over who the actual electors were. This was not the same thing. There's nobody in the government that was authorizing these these electorates. They just said, "Oh, we're the real electors," and they showed up with these forged certificates. It would be like if I just decided I was going to be an elector and I was just going to show up with, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and then we were going to be the 4 electors. Like, you can't just decide you're the real electorate. But that's what they did. So December 7th and 8th, Trump asked for research into whether fake electorate scheme would be possible. So this notion that Trump did not know what was going on is denied right there. He was literally asking them to do it, to research into this. Ken Cheesebro, oh man, this one I had a lot of Cheesebro jokes. Like, come on, you can't have a name like Cheesebro and not have some cheesy jokes about it. So anyway, Cheesebro emails Jim Troupis about importance of fake electorates voting on December 14th. And that's where the term fake electors comes from, is from that email. Mike Roman, Trump's director of Election Day operations, coordinates with teams across states. Christina Bobb from OANN relays progress reports to Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, Boris Epstein. So there was a coordinated effort between all of these fake electorates that they were going to show up and just say, we're the real electorates, and, the truth be damned. And Donald Trump was behind it. And you can't take this and divorce it from what happened on January 6th. You can't take all the failed attempts to try and overturn state results and divorce that from January 6th. January 6th was not an isolated incident. It didn't just happen all on its own. It was all part and parcel of the same play, the Green Bay sweep, to try and overturn the election. January 6th was not an insurrection in and of itself. It was a part of an insurrection that went on from December until January. It was an attempt to overturn the legitimate results of the election that Joe Biden legitimately won. And any other couching of it is dishonest and disingenuous. So then December 13, Jack Weilenchick emails about sending in faked electorate votes to Pence and strategy to keep it under wraps until Congress counts the vote on January 6th to surprise Democrats and media. Of course, everybody knew it was always happening by then. And then the idea was going to be, so then, let's go on to this. So December 14th, the fake electorates, The fake electors meet in 7 states. 84 fake electors met in state capitals across 7 battleground states to sign fraudulent electoral college certificates, basically declaring Trump the winner, even though Biden had been certified as winner in all 7 states. So these people just showed up and said, we're the real electors. Had no legal basis, no grounding, no objective anything to say who they were. To call them fake electors is almost to give them too much credit. They all tried to steal the election. They all lied and said that they had the authority to say what they were saying. They all lied and said Trump won when Trump didn't. And Trump knew this was happening. Trump arranged for this to happen, if not directly, then through his subordinates. So in Arizona, some of the electors were charged in 2016. They were all indicted. Some took immunity deals. I think one pled guilty. In Michigan, there were 16 fake electors, all charged with felonies. Nevada, all 6 were charged. In New Mexico, 5 fake electors, including contingency language, and 20 fake electors. In Pennsylvania, 10 fake electors in Wisconsin, all charged, some settled. They signed certificates declaring themselves duly elected and elected qualified electors, and sent those things to Congress, the National Archives, and state officials, even though legitimate electors had already been cast for Biden that same day. This is against the law. You can't sit there and talk about how you're the law and order presidents while making it, while apologizing for people that broke the law, that tried to literally steal the election. You, like, the most projection that Donald Trump ever projected is accusing Joe Biden of trying to steal the election. That's what all of this was. And you cannot, again, I cannot express this enough. You cannot deny, or you can't divorce this from what happened on January 6th. When you're talking about what happened on January 6th, you cannot exclude the fake electorate scheme. The whole thing hinged on the fake electorate scheme. The whole idea was that Mike Pence would illegally and unconstitutionally declare that there was some doubt into who won. When that didn't happen, Donald Trump tweeted that he wasn't going to cooperate, and then immediately the riots started. So you cannot tell me that what happened on January 6th, had nothing to do with the electorate scheme. So on December 18th, 2020, there was a 6-hour explosive Oval Office meeting with Sidney Powell, Michael Flynn, and Overstock CEO, which, why he was there, I don't even know. Patrick Byrne arrived without appointment and pitched Trump on seizing voting machines, declaring martial law, and appointing Powell as special counsel. Meeting devolves into a screaming match. The White House counsel and advisors forcefully reject the plan. Donald Trump, though, wasn't quite so receptive to just denying it. So he's still ready to push this. And this is the one where Cassidy Hutchinson drew ire by telling the truth. She texted that the West Wing is unhinged, and then she went and she talked to the January 6th committee about it. You had Mike Flynn photographed with Oath Keepers outside Capitol outside the Capitol 6 days earlier. So then this was December 18th. The next day, Trump says, we're going to have this Stop the Steal rally. Be there. It's going to be wild. So this is just hours after the meeting ended. Trump tweets at 1:42 a.m. Statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election, Big protest in DC on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. So he ran with this. He pushed this. You want to tell me that this tweet wasn't contingent on this meeting? Wasn't the direct result of that meeting? Immediate impact. Kelly Meggs from the Oath Keepers calls Enrique Tarrio, who is the Proud Boys chairman. Now that's when you start getting the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers locked together. They both were doing their own little violent, plans already, but now they're like, okay, let's coordinate. So Meg's post on Facebook pledging Oath Keepers will work together with Proud Boys and 3 Percenters. Far-right groups began aligning and coordinating for the first time. This happened after the insane meeting. Like, they talk about, oh, well, you had some of these violence would have happened, whether or not Trump did it. Trump got them to coordinate together. He said, stand back and stand by. And now he said, stand up and step forward. And they did. So Proud Boys form Ministry of Self-Defense. On December 20th, Proud Boys leadership formed special handpicked group communicating through encrypted messages. They established chain of command and began detailed planning for a January 6th attack. After this meeting, after Donald Trump's tweet, they used crowdfunding to raise money for a paramilitary equipment. They purchased concealed tactical vests and radio equipment. They began encrypted in coordination with other groups. All right. So how do you know all of this is connected to Donald Trump? Well, Roger Stone Communications acknowledged he spoke with Trump on December 27th. As preparations for January 6th were underway, Stone instructs Trump on how he can appoint a special counsel to ensure Donald Trump continues as president. Alexander credits Stone. This is something Roger and I have been planning for a long time. Stone remains in regular contact with both Trump and extremist groups. Encrypted friends of Stone, a chat active with extremist leaders. It was like all the crazies had their little chat and they were communicating with each other how they were going to carry out these plans to steal the election on January 6th. So then the Proud Boy leaders announced the plan to go incognito on January 6th by not wearing traditional black and yellow garb. One leader posts, I am assuming most of the protests will be at the Capitol because he spelled Capitol, it should be OL, building given what's going on inside. Then on December 30th, 1776 returns document. Proud Boys leadership receives document titled 1776 Returns, calling for occupation of crucial buildings on January 6th, arguing supporters should storm the Winter Palace, an apparent reference to attacking the Capitol. And I forget which one it was, whether it was Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, but one of them tweeted 1776 like right before it happened. So the other thing is you had all these congressmen and senators, including like people like Ted Cruz and all the ones that voted against the electorate, the actual electors, were doing so in coordination with this plan. They weren't denying that they didn't really have any sincere, authentic belief that those were not the real electors that they were denying. They were all trying to delay the vote and cause confusion and chaos so that it could be kicked up to this general backup plan that's in the Constitution. And that is like every state gets one vote. And they determine the state vote by, like, in all the senators and legislatures, or all the senators and representatives combined in a state get to vote, and then the winner of that state, that's the actual state's vote. So like North Dakota would have 3 people, 2 senators and 1 representative. They all vote for Trump, and then all the electors and all the representatives and senators in California get 1 vote. So then California and North Dakota end up getting the same amount of vote. And so it's like the Republicans just have more states, and so that was how they were going to win the election. So Oath Keepers provide security for Roger Stone heading up into the day before. The Oath Keepers, you know, they protected Roger Stone from whatever. Stuart Rhodes meets with the Proud Boys leadership, including Enrique Tarrio, in a secret garage meeting. Trump directs Meadows, according to Cassidy Hutchins' testimony. Trump tells Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to call Roger Stone and Michael Flynn the evening to ask what was going to happen on January 6th. Don't tell me he did not know what was going to happen on January 6th. Stone discusses violence. In leaked call, Stone encourages supporter to descend on the Capitol. Kelly Meggs discusses security with Stone on January 5th and 6th. Oath Keepers begin unloading weapons to QRF in Alexandria, Virginia. All right. So this is the people that were involved in this Friends of Stone encrypted signal chat. Roger Stone, Enrique Tarrio, Stuart Rhodes, Ali Alexander, Owen Schreier from InfoWars, and Alex Jones in InfoWars. All of these people were like were conspiring together to overthrow the government, and then Roger Stone was reporting directly to Donald Trump. Don't tell me that January 6th was just a thing that happened that he didn't have anything to do with. So 10 a.m., as planned, the Proud Boys began to march. Nearly 200 Proud Boys, led by Nordine Biggs and Raul, march away from Trump's speech directly toward the Capitol before Trump finishes speaking. This was planned. This was planned. They're like, oh, well, they attacked started earlier. No, this was all planned. Trump's speech. Trump tells the crowd at the ellipse, if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore, and says he'll march on the Capitol with them. And he doesn't, but he tried to, and we all know that story. But here's the thing. Then this goes back to the BBC lawsuit. Is he said peacefully one time. He said fight 20 times. The idea that he wasn't actually encouraging them to fight and they were just like to protest and just chant or something is insane, and it's ridiculous. And it's, if everything else, just the fact that he sat there in the dining room and watched it without taking any action proves that they were doing exactly what he wanted them to do. So then the crowd, the overall crowd, they arrive, or they march from the Capitol, or from the rally to the Capitol at about 1 p.m. Then at 2:11, they first breach. And one of the things, there's this video of, Capitol Police escorting people in or just letting people in, as though that's like the beginning of it. This is like how disingenuous and dishonest these people are. The first breach wasn't even through the door. It was through a broken window. Dominic Pizarro, one of the Proud Boys, smashes a window, allowing first rioters to enter the Capitol at 2:11. Joe Biggs and others are close behind. Rhodes texts FOS. Stuart Rhodes texts Friends of Stone chat that he's at the back door of the U.S. Capitol at Oath Keepers enter into military formation. So this was like, they're not just coming from the one end, they're coming in from multiple entries. Stack 2 enters at 3:15. Joshua James, who provided security for Stone the day before, and another Oath Keepers group pushed through the East Rotunda doors. Then finally, after 187 minutes of this happening, Trump finally tells the writers to go home. And they immediately left after this tweet. If he had tweeted that 187 minutes earlier, I'd be a lot more inclined to believe that he didn't want it to happen. But he sat there for more than 3 hours watching this happen. Do not tell me that what was happening was not exactly what he wanted to happen. And you can just take your, Nancy Pelosi didn't let him, bring in the guard nonsense and flush it down the toilet. That is just so stupid. If you want any proof that he can make the National Guard come in against the wishes of the Speaker of the House or of anybody else, look what he's doing right now. Look what he already did this year. How come he can do it now? He couldn't do it then. Certification resumes after the Capitol is secured. Congress reconvenes and completes certification of Biden's victory early on January 7th. So then that thing finally ended. That's how things ended. And you can sit there and say, well, it was, it's stupid to say that was an attempt to overthrow the government. It was a stupid attempt to overthrow the government, but it was still it was still an attempt to overthrow the government. If you start dismissing things that Trump did because they're stupid, then you're just going to run out of things. He's a stupid man. He says stupid things. He does stupid things. That doesn't mean that they're legal. He organized an attempt to try and overthrow the U.S. government. Full stop. Overall, there were over 2,000 rioters who entered the Capitol. There were 174 police officers injured. 73 of them were Capitol and 65 of them were Metro. I don't know what the other 36 were. There were 140 plus officers assaulted with weapons or causing serious bodily harm. Stop saying there weren't any weapons. There were weapons. We'll get to that in a minute. There were 5 deaths within 36 hours, including one officer who died of stroke after assault. And yes, the rioter who tried to charge through a broken window of a barricaded door with multiple Secret Service agents with guns pointed at it got shot because they were trying to protect the Vice President of the United States. Stop with this lunacy that she was somehow the victim here. There were 4 police officers who died by suicide in the days or weeks that followed the attack, and there were 1,532 people charged with federal crimes. Overall, they did $2.7 billion of property damage, including $30 million in Capitol building repairs, $3 million in cleanup and restoration, the Capitol police expenses, DC Metro police costs, federal agency response, the security enhancements, and ongoing investigations. As of 2024, only 437,000 or 15% of the $3 million in court-ordered restitution had been paid back before Trump's 2025 pardons eliminated remaining obligations. The Republicans have just gone on full, they did nothing wrong. There was nothing wrong that happened here. Sure, 140 police officers were assaulted, but the back to blue Republicans don't care about that. They won't even hang the plaque. The officer injuries included multiple traumatic brain injuries. One guy lost an eye. Another one had 2 cracked ribs and 2 smashed spinal discs. That doesn't sound comfortable. One was stabbed with metal fence spikes. One was crushed between the door and a riot shield. Officer Michael Fanone had a heart attack. He actually died. He was actually dead for a minute, and then he got brought back to life. He had burns and traumatic brain injury from being dragged and beaten with pipes. He was stunned with a taser. At least 15 officers were hospitalized. Some suffered career-ending disabilities. Some people lost their ability to work for the rest of their lives as a result of this attack. Don't tell me it wasn't violent. This was not a protest. This was not even a riot. This was a part of a coup. Not the whole coup. It was a part of a coup. There were 80 defendants. There were 80 plus weapons used, including Mark Meadows, who had 2 loaded handguns, Guy Reffitt, who had a pistol. You had Christopher Alberts, who had a loaded 9mm pistol and 25 rounds. You had John Benavides, who fired a gun in the air during the riot. You had Jared Berger, who had a loaded 9mm, and you had Mario Maeders, who was convicted of having firearms on the ground. So when you see these people say they didn't have any guns, yes, some of them had guns. They also had loaded pipes. They had baseball bats. They had hockey sticks and crutches. They had stun guns and bear spray. They had fire extinguishers. They had stolen police shields. They had metal poles and fence stakes. They had the 2 pipe bombs that were found at the RNC and the DNC. And they had Molotov cocktails. So don't say there weren't weapons. Don't say there wasn't violence. Tell that to the guy that lost his eye. So Enrique Tarrio was convicted of seditious conspiracy. Stephen Rhodes was convicted of seditious conspiracy. Don't say they weren't convicted of seditious conspiracy. They were convicted of sedition. They were trying to overthrow the government. Other Proud Boy leaders that got significant sentences were Ethan Norton, Joseph Biggs, Zachary Rehl, and Dominique Pizzola. And I don't care that they're pardoned. That's just more corruption from Donald Trump. They still did that. They still tried to overthrow the government. Then you've got all the cases where the fake electorates are being charged. Of course, now they can only be charged by states and not the federal government because of the guy's because of the pardons. So you look through some of these weirdo. It's all because of the rhetoric, starting with the Obama whatever. No, it wasn't. I don't know what wasn't, but I'm sure it was. The status quo changes every 10 years based on young retards' interests. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Go watch Trump telling people to be peaceful. Yeah, well, watch him go say, again, I think I've addressed this quite thoroughly. Dang, you're insane. People with crutches, dude, you're reaching. So this JT guy really is sort of just full on immune to logic and facts. Okay, stop doing drugs. You're fake AF since you can't respond. Just like the Democrat Party. So yeah, I what is there to respond to? Just nonsense. So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. I think the whole thing is pretty well established that this was entirely a coup attempt, and I think that I've gone through the details enough that and you can say it's nonsense, JT, but everything I said is a fact, and you can just ignore the facts, and you can hide from them, and you can cower like the little MAGA that you are. You can bury your head in the sand, but those things will still remain facts. They're independent of what I believe. They're independent of what you believe, and they are absolutely 100% facts. All you can do is name call. and deny. But the reality is on my side. Thank you for playing. So, all right. That's it for today's broadcast. I'll talk to you some more tomorrow. Thanks for hanging with me through all this. Even you, JT.